During the process of producing my preliminary task, I did not know as much about cinematography and editing as I do now. For example, the continuity techniques we learnt about at the start of the course may not have been applied correctly in my preliminary task, as I had only just been taught when and how to use them. An example of this is when I demonstrated the 180-degree rule in my preliminary task incorrectly. As shown here, you can see that I underestimated the distance between the two characters in the shot when storyboarding, and has therefore led to the improper use of framing characters in the scene. Although I tried to call this correct use of the 180-degree rule, it's really not a good example. I learnt from this when filming my opening sequence, as I have now positioned the characters further apart when carrying this out, so that there is enough space between them to ensure a clearer shot. I've not included a pan this time either, as I felt this looked too amateurish and out of place at this point in the sequence. Instead, I've used a simple cut between the two over-the-shoulder shots of characters. Another mistake I made during the production of the preliminary task was precisely following the storyboard. Although the point of making a storyboard an animatic is to visualise what the finished product will look like, it is also only meant as a first draft. I didn't see it like this when filming my preliminary task, as I saw it more of a tool I had to stick to in order to produce my video. This was not a huge problem in filming, but I would have liked to have been slightly more creative with some shots if I were to film it again. Therefore, whilst filming my opening sequence, I only used my storyboard as a basic frame for the way shots were filmed and edited. I still used the majority of what I had written down and drawn on the storyboard in Final Edit, but I also added a lot of extra shots in. The purpose of this was mainly to improve the continuity, as I had found there was not enough time allowed for each shot on my storyboard for some shots, particularly those with dialogue, so I had to change the duration of these. Some shots in the preliminary task show careless camera work, such as the panning shot used here. The camera movement is shaky, as I did not use a tripod to ensure a smooth transition. In my opening sequence, I have learnt from this fault and have used a tripod so that there is no longer any shaking visible during the pan. In this same shot, I displayed an amateur mistake in that you can clearly see me filming in the reflection of the television. This did occur again in the first edit of my preliminary task filming, which I had to cut out because of this. Therefore, there was a case of poor continuity at this point, as shots did not flow smoothly on from one another. When I refilmed for my final edit, I made sure this did not happen a third time by adjusting the angle I was filming from, to ensure I was no longer visible on camera. Aside from the more practical elements of production, I have also looked in greater detail at the planning and research into my opening sequence than I did in my preliminary task. For example, from preparation of the preliminary task, I have learnt that careful planning will lead to a success of the overall product. For example, the animatic details, such as duration, camera movement, and music, were more precise and detailed for my opening sequence, as I have learnt more varied vocabulary to use and apply to different areas of production. I also wrote a script for my opening sequence to ensure all dialogue and stage corrections were carefully thought through before filming. I did not do this for my preliminary task because I did not yet know how to create a script, as well as not really having the need for one. It was a much less formal production task.